Hey, everyone. Welcome to the Unfiltered Podcast. My name is Stephenson. I have the joy of being a church planter and executive director of church planting with Converge. And say hey to my co-host here.
I'm Danny Parmelee, and I oversee church planting for Converge Mid-America.
And we're just having real conversations today and excited to talk about church planting. And specifically, I think one of those challenging points that every church planter has to wrestle with, and is simply, how do I name my church? Like, what should I name it? What should I call it? And you feel somewhat locked in. Like, this is a big deal. Whatever I name my church year one, maybe the name year 30, year 40, and so it's one of those things. I know for me, when we were naming our church the first time, like there was this unsaid pressure, like, don't screw this up. And so I'm curious just about for you, Danny, like, what did you wrestle with when it came to naming church plant, and why did you land on a Greek name versus any other name? And would you doing it again? Would you do it the same, or would you do it differently?
Oh yeah, I've got lots of opinions and wisdom, maybe advice on it. And for those that don't know, the name of our church is Epikos Church, and it is a Greek name, and it's actually pronounced properly in the Greek Epikos. It just didn't catch on that way, which is part of
what not everybody in Milwaukee spoke Greek.
Yeah, exactly. So and there was some advantages to the name that we had, and some major disadvantages as well. So let me start with this, and start with just the way that we named our church, just so you kind of understand the background and the process. Well, we kind of just use a generic operating name when we first kind of started. And then as we kind of developed a little bit.
What do you mean by generic operating name?
Generic operating name, like I think it was called East Side Project. We were on the east side of Milwaukee. And so even our tax forms and all of that, it was East Side Project, because we were kind of coached, like, don't pick a name yet, just kind of, it's like a pet, bring it home and let it kind of grow and evolve, that type of thing.
Yeah.
I actually disagree with that because it creates problems later when paperwork and all of that type of thing. So more church planners now are actually picking that name before there's ever a launch team. And that's the other thing. A lot of people say, well, we'll have other people kind of speak into it. But the thing is, most people don't understand naming, branding, the significance. So what we did is we actually went around to public places, to coffee shops, places where people were hanging out. And I gave a list of like 5 or 6 names that I thought were kind of neat. And had people, I said, just choose a name that you like, because we really were trying to name it for non-Christians. And they say, well, what's this for? And I didn't want to say it was for a church, because I didn't want them to pick a church name. I just wanted them to pick a name. And the name that got chose was Epic 242. And we realized that sounded pretty much like a youth group, because that was kind of like the number thing back then, and, off of Acts 242, but Epic. And then we realized, well, Epic is kind of generic. There's this Epic software, there's Epic Records, Epic whatever. So we didn't want confusion there. And we were in an area of the city where everything was just, ethnic names. And so that's why we, we'll just take the Greek form of it. And the advantage of that is that when people talked about the church, like, hey, have you gone to that church called Epikos? People knew. There was never confusion. Like, hey, did you hear about that new church, Grace?
There's not 2 Epikos.
Right, yeah, there's not 2. So in that, it had a great advantage. The problem is it did create a lot of confusion. Even after being established for like 8 or 9 years, we would be at festivals or parades. People were like, oh, that's that Greek church. You know what I mean? And they actually thought we were
Greek Orthodox.
Greek Orthodox church. And so for us, the creativity, actually, I should say this. Our real name was actually just Epikos. We did not want to have church in the name, because we
want people to know we're a church?
Edgy, and we were a Christian spiritual community. We were not a church. And then so many years, people are like, so what is it? And it's like, well, because I'm looking for a church. It's like, oh, well, that's what we are. We are a church. So I really do encourage people to put church actually in their name, and especially in their logo, because you don't have the advantage of Pepsi or Nike that people are just going to see, whatever.
And you also don't have $100 million to put into marketing
to put into marketing. So when people see it and then they see, church, they actually understand. So that's where I just say go with clarity on it. And sometimes you want to be the most creative, but like you said, longevity wise, you got to be thinking of that a little bit. How about you? What was a little bit of your journey and process for it?
I mean, when similar time frame, we were probably just on the tail end of it, but there was still this popularity of kind of coming up with a cool, creative going with Latin or going with Greek. And First Church we planted in Phoenix, it was pretty adamant, like you can't name something with a Latin name because Spanish speakers don't know what it is, but everybody else that's an English speaker is going to think you're a Spanish language church.
Yeah.
And so you have to really be deliberate on does this connect specifically to our culture and our society and our community? For me, the passage in the New Testament about the harvest is plentiful and the workers are few. Therefore, pray to the God of the harvest. Like that always has just been one of those verses for me that's always motivated me, moved me when it came to ministry and kind of even getting up in the morning and doing what I do. And so there was just this instant connection going, man, maybe we need to connect to that. And then there was this wrestle like, well, there's a couple big harvests. You've got a big harvest in California. You got this big harvest that's well known in Chicago. Are people going to associate us with them?
Yeah.
And yes, there was some of that, but there was an element kind of going, I think has a greater appeal to that. And we just tell people it's a word from the Bible.
Right.
And it gives us an opportunity to kind of explain who we are and kind of where we're going. We intentionally put community church into our name because we wanted people to know, like, we are a part of the community. This is who we are. This is what we bleed. And we're here to serve and to be a part of their world. We've had people that were coming to our church because they went to a previous church that had harvest in their name.
Yeah.
And so there was an element like, oh, it must be safe. And they come and like, are you guys connected? No,
No,
we're not connected. So there is still a level of that explanation that goes. But, specifically, like I think about who we were connecting with in the Phoenix metro area. We were in a part of town that had a lot of Midwest transplants. And so there was some thinking in our name and in creating a name that would it have a tie and roots to people that just had this familiarity with rural living, Midwest living. Harvest seemed to be an appealing name that could fit any context. And so that's one of the reasons we chose that name. And similar here, when we planted again in Florida, we really debated on, changing it up. This is our opportunity to do it differently. But then part of our vision is to reach into rural Florida. And we thought, you know what, harvest, people get it. And so why change it? And
I thought you kept it because you had some leftover newcomer mugs and you just wanted to
exactly.
squeeze that extra.
We totally redid logo, website, all that kind of stuff. And so even vision statements, all those were new. So unfortunately it didn't work out that well.
I do want to mention a little bit. One of the things to consider is if you put the name of the city in it. And this is not a hard and fast rule, but you do need to think about it. So there's a lot of guys that will start out and maybe they're in a suburb and it's, Richmond or whatever. And so it's like Richmond Community Church or Richmond, whatever, fill in kind of the blank. The advantages of that is that you obviously really show your commitment to the city and kind of depending geographically where you are, or even neighborhood specific, where it's like, this is a neighborhood within, within like a larger metro area. The downside is if God ends up moving you because of opportunity, whether it is facility, whether a lot of church planners start out in kind of an area and all of a sudden, for whatever reason, God provides a whole bunch of people from the launch team. They're on the other side of the city, that doesn't have that same, identity. So it is something definitely to just to kind of like think.
Or even
think
if you end up multi-siding down the road,
that
can become a hindrance to you as well, because all of a sudden you're this community church and you're moving into another community and they're going, that's not us. That's going to detract from your ability to connect to that community.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know too. I've seen, planters be creative on this front. I know one planter that landed in the community and similar to you, like they refused to name the church. But then they use that as a marketing ploy to get people to come to the first week. And it's kind of like, this is your church. We're a part of the community. You come and name it. And so the first Sunday, our launch Sunday, you get the opportunity to actually name the church, which, and then they just gave them 3 options, kind of like, here, we can live with all 3 of these. And then the community voted those that came and then, they kind of created a different level of ownership or buy-in. I don't know if I can recommend that. It's like, just pick something that works and lead and get moving forward, but it's okay to be creative. But I said, don't get too creative.
Yep.
Like if your name needs too much explanation
Yeah.
behind it, you are losing the opportunity to connect with just the normal person in your community.
Right. And I know we're not talking about logos here, but I say the same thing because I have a lot of guys where they're like, oh, like this logo, we'll see how the 3 different points on this T are the Trinity. And all of a sudden you're like, no one's going to get
Nobody
that.
knows that.
You know, and it
Yes.
makes it look messy and it makes it look horrible. You just need something that looks good and clean and professional enough that people go, oh, that reflects who we are just by
Yeah.
the feel of it more than some sort of like secret code that's
Absolutely.
buried into it.
Yeah,
So,
it's got to flow well into a logo, and then I would say as well, it's got to be able to flow well into a URL.
yes. Yep.
So those are the 2 things to help you think through,
Yeah.
a potential strong name to name your church.
Yep. And the other thing is if you are going to a new area, doing the research before you go. So I recently had a planter that did all of his naming and branding and logo and found that there was a similar name, almost exactly the same name. It was just out of order, like the church, whatever, city name church or
The
city
church
name.
of,
Yeah. Type of thing. And he just, for whatever reason, missed it in the Google searches. And the other thing that if you're going to an area, is to talk to other pastors because there could be that was the name of a church that no longer exists.
Bingo.
And
Yeah.
you're all of a sudden taking on someone else's baggage simply because you haven't done the research that way.
Yeah, and you may be in the same location.
In the same location. It's like, oh, wow, what? And I didn't know they were restarting.
Yeah,
I thought
yeah.
that would... So just being careful of those types of things. So
No, I think that's great.
I do think that to take some pressure off is that it's not the end of the world if you do have to rename the church. And if you have to rename it because of location or you come up with a better name, I definitely, like I said, had regrets of the name that we ended up choosing. But for us, we ended up having enough brand recognition over time, and people recognized it was a great reputation within the community. So we chose to just kind of stick it out. But if things aren't going well, sometimes it's a relaunch opportunity, and you just change the name.
And sometimes even when it's going well, and you realize, man, maybe we can actually get more ground. With a new name change, or you realize, you know what, the name we originally named our church and the name behind that has changed, it's shifted, and now we're more this. That can leverage, and again, it comes back to how you cast vision and help people understand this is why change is happening. You'll always have people that will push back against change, but it is easier if you have the same pastor, the same team that launched the church, do the name change for sure. It's not going to be quite as big of a headache.
Yeah. Lee, what trends are you seeing trends now? So I think back to the 90s, 2000s, we did see a lot of the community churches, and then you had the Gen Xers, which were doing the Latin, Greek, Hebrew names. What are you seeing there right now?
I think it kind of almost depends on which tribe you're a part of.
Mhm.
Like I do notice like naming is now kind of lending itself to the tribe.
Yeah.
I do see like a lot of redeeming, redemption, those type of words being used when it comes to the church, especially of a certain vein theologically, tend to move that direction. A lot of E words, evident, elevation, elevate, that seems to be kind of an in thing right now. What about for you? What else are you seeing out there?
I see, obviously there was a big push for urban and for city, that city was in the name of
city church.
I mean, even if it was a rural church, I feel like some of them still like whatever city church type of thing. So seeing a lot of that.
Yeah. And I would say ones that depict some level of movement, it Pipeline Church, they're depending on where you're at in the city, Gateway, hear that one still being used quite a bit. I think it comes down to find something that works for you, works for your community, that your community can naturally understand without a big explanation. But I think you lended yourself well in talking about the fact that it's important to put church in that name because that's what you are and that's what you're doing.
Yeah. Cool. Final just kind of thought or question. How much should other people speak into it, do you think? I mean, what is the advantage of either a team or even going to the point of hiring a marketing firm? Is it more of this is between you and God, type of thing? What would you say is kind of the balance?
Yeah, I don't think you need to go hire a marketing team for the naming piece. I think, what resonates in your heart. Like, I would never name my church a name that my wife hated. And so I'm definitely going to run it through her spectrum. And then probably a handful of just trusted people that kind of know the community and know kind of my heart. And where we're wanting to go with a new church to speak into that. But I think it would be important to have both men and women speak into that, because we may have different perspectives of the same name. And so it's helpful to get that different perspective. But I think that's an area where you can save a lot of money instead of just going out and hiring a firm to do that. Now, when it comes to logo development, those things, that's where I would, if you're going to spend the money, use it there versus on just coming up with a name.
Yeah. And I know you said it before, but just saying again, as far as website, seeing the availability and what the availability is.
Absolutely.
Even if that is not the name of another church in the city that you're planting, chances are it's another name of a church somewhere, just to kind of know. And it may, especially if you're down to just 2 or 3 and it's like, well, hey, this one's available and it works for us.
Yeah. And there are some names that people need to be aware of that are trademarked. And I know of churches that have been sued because they chose the same name. And so you do want to be careful and do your homework, even on that aspect of what legally can you actually name your church to. Well, guys, this has been fun. Great conversation, just talking about naming that church. And so good luck as you're kind of wandering through that phase. And if you're beyond that, congratulations. It's good to kind of get over that hump as well. This has been just Real Conversations, the Unfiltered podcast. Thanks for being with us. Until next time, keep it real.